Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, Ewan from What Culture Comics, joined as ever by Zoe.
Still Zoe.
And we're here in the old podcast setup because we have some interesting news that broke overnight regarding Kevin Feige and his relationship to Marvel Entertainment, because everyone who's obviously not been living underneath some sort of rock on the ice planet Hoth knows that Kevin Feige has basically, designed the most successful cinematic franchise of the last
forever?
Yeah. I want to say forever. I don't know if there's something else that's pipped it to it, but obviously, we know the success of Avengers Endgame, we know the success of Marvel as a whole, and basically it came out overnight from Deadline that Feige has now changed his role. So he was originally the president of Marvel Studios, and there was we'll get into the whole logistics behind why he moved around in a few minutes, but then obviously now he is now the chief creative officer of Marvel Entertainment as a whole. Now, everyone who's aware of Marvel knows that Joe Quesada, who is the former Marvel editor-in-chief, had assumed that role for, I think, since 2009 when Axel Alonso replaced him. I'm trying to remember.
2009 or 2007?
Yes,
a while.
I can't remember now. But yeah, Quesada left to basically pursue his own things. Well, he's now kind of like the ambassador for Marvel in a way.
He's their new Stan Lee, in a sense.
Yes, in a way, yeah. And now Kevin Feige basically has control over Marvel Studios and Marvel TV. So Marvel TV, I think, is effectively dead at this point. So that means, I think Jeff Loeb was heading that up. And now that means, obviously it makes sense when you think of Disney Plus and how we have stuff on Disney Plus coming from Moon Knight, we have She-Hulk, we have so many shows coming from Disney at that point to basically sell that streaming service. And it makes sense because even though I love Daredevil and I love Punisher and I love the first season of Jessica Jones or the first half season of Luke Cage, Marvel TV were kind of hung out to dry with the MCU. They never really got to integrate themselves more fully. So I guess Feige's appointment in that sense is a good thing.
I mean, it was never going to work. The minute it hit Netflix, the minute those shows hit Netflix, it was like, well, the dream is dead for
yes.
that.
And it's a shame because they have a contract thing in Marvel where after they've been cancelled, Marvel have to wait like a select few years to actually use those versions of the characters, which is kind of a good thing in my eyes because it means that we still have a chance that Charlie Cox could return as Daredevil, Vincent D'Onofrio could return as Wilson Fisk, and obviously John Bernthal.
But it'll be a while.
But it will be a while, which is a frustrating thing. But yeah, so the actual article from Deadline mentions that all of the company's key creative executives across film and TV will now report to him. So Marvel TV and Marvel Family Entertainment now fall under the remit of Marvel Studios. Marvel Family Entertainment do the animation, which is where you
where the good stuff is.
You think it would be called Marvel Animation, but Marvel Family Entertainment, I guess.
It looks works.
Yeah. So the reason why Feige's kind of juggled these roles around is if you were keeping up with the MCU, crikey, it would have been around about the time of Captain America Civil War, just before... You'll probably know that him and Ike Perlmutter did not get along. Now, Ike Perlmutter is a nasty piece of work. He's been the vice president of Marvel Entertainment for a while?
He was CEO?
CEO, yeah. He's moved up to chairman now, hasn't he? Yeah.
Gotten the big promotion.
Yeah, and him and Feige did not get along whatsoever. Apparently he's very standoffish. He's very kind of... I'm trying to think of the right word, but basically, in an environment that encourages creative freedom, he was basically stifling that in a way. And there was a whole thing during Civil War where Robert Downey Jr. wanted to negotiate an even bigger paycheck, and Ike Perlmutter was like, "No, that's crazy. What is he doing?" And I'm just going to imagine him as J. Jonah Jameson says, "No, can't do that." And they tried to replace him with someone else to be the Iron Man,
which would have worked.
figure.
Definitely worked.
Yeah, and obviously Feige was like, "Well, I'll leave if you do that." And then Feige now answers directly to Alan Horn, who works for Disney, and Bob Iger as well. So that's an interesting change. I think the big takeaway here is that with Feige becoming the chief creative officer, is that Perlmutter, even though he's kind of changed his position now to be chairman, it seems rather ceremonial. He's still apparently going to be presiding over the publishing and business aspects of Marvel Comics, but as a whole, hopefully this means no more, let's try and replace the X-Men with the Inhumans because the Fox are using the characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think some of the politics of it should hopefully be pulled back, because if there's one thing about Feige, he does clearly love the comics and he is clearly very well versed in them, whereas I feel like for Perlmutter it was more of a matter of, well, what will make sort of the most successful business moves. So obviously the issues that a lot of people have with comic production and the prices and how they're sold a lot of those problems are still going to exist because it's the same people. But in the sense of creative changes, I think there's a lot of potential.
Yes, we'll get into the kind of potential of what is actually going to happen, but we'll for now we'll look at the actual creative structure of Marvel as it now lines up. So in the Deadline article that kind of broke the news last night, it says that Dan Buckley will continue as president of Marvel Entertainment, while Ike Perlmutter remains chairman. Long a creative collaborator for Feige in publishing and television, Buckley will have a dual reporting structure going forward, Deadline hears. I love how they plug themselves midway through the except so they get the name in twice. He will continue to oversee publishing, creative, editorial, and in that capacity, he will now report to Feige. Buckley also is responsible for publishing operations, sales, creative services, games, licensing, and events. There, he will report to Perlmutter. It is expected that Joe Quesada will remain a creative lead for Marvel Entertainment, reporting to Buckley. It is expected that all the creative execs in publishing will report to Buckley. So Buckley's still heavily involved. I think that's a good thing. He kind of is a Marvel man through and through. And it seems as though, obviously, with him being a partner of Feige's, that means the two of them will probably be closely interlinked on the Marvel front going forward. And I think the slightly frustrating thing that's come out over the past few hours since the news broke is that everyone's been focusing on the TV aspects. But when you are Marvel's chief creative officer, that obviously has far-reaching implications, not just for the films and TV, but the actual comics that inspire them. So obviously there are a few concerns and a few different things going forward.
As much as I want to stay positive about it, because I do think there's a lot of, as I've said, potential for it to be good, I also think a lot of the concerns are pretty valid, because obviously with any chain, there is the potential that, especially for someone so focused on Marvel Studios, he'll be like, comics?
Yeah.
What about the comics?
I mean, for all that Kevin Feige, all the success he's brought to Marvel Studios, I guess there is the concern that when you're someone who is not so familiar with how the actual comic system operates, that you then have a movies man, and you bring him in,
and he
kicks the door in, and he's like, CB Cebulski, I don't like the cut of your jib, son. And then he takes him out and then just starts doing all these different things. I think it's interesting because if you're so accustomed to success at Marvel Studios and you look at Marvel Comics and you're thinking, well, I don't understand how we've got the most successful movie franchise of all time based on these properties, and yet no one's reading the characters. When we speak of the other great filmic franchises of the last 2 decades, you think of Harry Potter's, your Game of Thrones with TV. The books still sell like hotcakes. They're still selling today. They still sell loads. And obviously, you can argue that literature that isn't comics is going to have a wider reach than funny books ever will. But there was a time when comics were king currency, and they are today. They are still today in the sense that you think of all the things that we experience and consume in TV and film. A lot of them are coming from comics. This is the gold mine of the creative medium, as it were. So yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how Feige will look at that and whether he'll think what measures he'd potentially adopt to try and get stuff to do it. Because I remember before we came on, you said that maybe this could mean we'll actually get Marvel making a more concerted effort to promote their comics and films and TV shows, which makes sense. Because if you read a Marvel comic now, you'll read it up and it'll advertise the film and the TV show. It's like, you already got us in. We're all reading the nerd stuff. You don't need to take us down to then go
deep in the nerd lore.
Yeah, but apparently Perlmutter still retains control over publishing and
which
business.
Is where some of my concerns lie, because in essence, I wouldn't say there's something definitively wrong with the way comics are right now, but I can see a lot of concern in the sense of the reason I think a lot of the MCU does well is because people aren't totally aware of these storylines. So I can see a problem for Feige in the sense of how successful do I want these storylines to be? And what storylines and events do I actually want to promote? Because if I promote one that we want to actually convert into a film, a lot of people may be less interested if they're like, well, I know who dies.
I mean, I guess the way you'd look at that, again, if I were to use Harry Potter as an example, you'd look at the films obviously started coming out while the books were still being published, and you had a book come out and you had people wanting to read the book to get ahead of the film. So I guess there could be a draw to it that way, and I could even see, if Marvel are looking to do, I don't know, a new event comic gets, let's just say for all intents and purposes, that Absolute Carnage got announced today.
That was exactly what I was thinking.
And Kevin Feige, plus that as like, oh, Absolute Carnage will be the next big Marvel event movie. And then you could actually lead into that. If you want to get a head start on the event, you can actually look at stuff here. Obviously, stuff will change with the film, but this is the big thing that we're going with. The concern for me is that for the past, or since the MCU really came around, is that we've seen, and even before that, we talk about the status quo and how, Marvel and DC like to kind of retain a sense of stability, or some would say, stifle change, but whatever. And the big thing with Marvel is that with the MCU success, they've tried all sorts of different things to try and capitalize on that hype. We've seen characters aesthetically change to adopt the similarities of the MCU, which is weird because the MCU is based on the Ultimate Comics, and that means you have the whole thing there as well. There's a unique visual identity for Marvel back in the early 2000s. Why are you changing it to accommodate films, whatever? And I think the thing is, when we try and mimic the films, we lose something what's special with the comics. And I think House of X and Powers of 10 is a perfect example of that, because every other... Well, no, X-Men's kind of been lucky in the sense that, it's been Fox. They've not really had to do anything to
and the
accommodate...
films have always been.
Yes, they've not really had to do anything to accommodate what Fox have done, because even though it's been popular, it's never really been influential to the degree of what we've seen within MCU. So that's interesting for me, because I think Hickman came up before House of X and Powers of 10 debuted and basically said for far too long at Marvel, the past 10 years, we've had comics that have tried to really, really tap into and emulate what we've seen in the MCU. When Civil War came out, we suddenly found ourselves with Civil War 2. When Avengers Infinity War came out, we suddenly found ourselves with the new Infinity Wars event. And that's really frustrating, because if you're trying to capitalize on readers coming into Marvel, if you're trying to get an MCU fan who doesn't read anything, how do you actually rope them in? Because if you're there, for me personally, if I was just watching Avengers Infinity War and you tell me that Marvel are doing right now, this very instant, they are doing an Infinity Wars event, I won't want to read that. I want to read the original Infinity Gauntlet from 1991.
Well, that's it. When I have friends who try and get into comics, usually it is based around Infinity War, and they're like, oh, I've been trying to find the comics, but I can't find them because everything's named pretty much. It's like the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, Infinity series. And
Infinity Crusade.
You have to gently be like, oh, it starts here, but actually it starts in Silver Surfer. And I do wish, I don't understand how they haven't decided to capitalize on creating volumes based around things people want to watch, or even an MCU based sort of universe, because that would prevent this whole oh, and Tony Stark happens to look like Robert Downey Jr. Don't think about it.
I did think about that the other day, actually. You think of the unique things that draw people to the MCU. I think one of the big things for me is that there isn't the sliding timeline, and that things do begin and end. And I think audiences like things when they're definitive. I mean, you can talk about the cyclical nature of things keep on being repeated, remakes, reboots, whatever. I still think that audiences really latch onto a journey that they can see, and when something has a definitive conclusion, they really like that, which is what we saw with Avengers Endgame. But the problem is, if you're accessing the comics, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark have been the same age for 40 years now, so that's an issue in itself. I think if they were to do that, it would make sense, because I think there have been rumors that the Ultimate Universe might be getting a revival, which again would be pretty cool, because we don't need we can talk about all day about how the Ultimate Universe inspired the MCU, but I think an actual MCU comics wing would be very interesting. I personally wouldn't care for it, but I would be curious to see if that kind of tapped into the same kind of success as the Star Wars comics that Marvel have been doing.
I think it'd be a good gateway, even if they wouldn't necessarily be specifically good comics, if that makes sense. Just in the sense of obviously people who want to get into it have this way in, and they don't have to be like, oh, well, why is the Hulk alive, and why is he grey, and what's happening with this, and why are these people dead? You can just read the comics, and then if you're like, I liked this, you can sort of try and figure out your way from there.
I think it must be frustrating for people at Disney, because obviously they have Star Wars as well, and obviously they acquired Star Wars after the MCU started or whatever. But the thing with Star Wars is that when they got that, it was very easy for them to say, okay, all this expanded universe crap, we're getting rid of it. This is our new this is our new continuity now. This is the new canon. Everything that we do here, whether we publish it in comics, in books, in TV, or in film, this is the new continuity. This is everything a Star Wars fan will need to get to grips with what we're having. Whereas with Marvel,
where do you start?
The source material, it's preeminent. It kind of stems from decades, and that must be a huge concern to them. And that's why I'm slightly concerned is, well, maybe Kevin Feige looks at this. I don't know necessarily if he has the power to do this, but he comes into Marvel Comics and he looks at it and goes, well, would it not make more sense, considering how successful the MCU has been, if we rebooted the universe that, you know, we've had? And that's frustrating as well for me, because I feel as though if that were to happen, that would be ignoring the numerous relaunches and reboots that have happened over the past decade. I know we talk about the New 52 a lot here. I mean, I rant about it all the time, and everyone's probably sick to death of it. But the New 52, even though that saw an immediate uptick in sales and attention for DC, I do think it harmed it in the long run.
Well, it also saw an uptick of people being like, what is this?
Yeah. But I mean, I see it all the time in the comment sections for like our videos, that people kind of came into comics in the New 52, and that's great. I love that. I love the idea of an event coming in and people being able to latch on. Yeah, and I love that. And, you know, I think my issue is that comics aren't inaccessible. It's the resource, the scarcity of resources to help people access them that makes it difficult. Because when I grew up, I used to read all the encyclopedias that were at the local library. I used to read all the encyclopedias and stuff, and that's how I kind of learned everything. I kind of really enjoyed the aspect of going onto Wikipedias and like looking up the different wiki entries and different characters and different storylines just to get clued up on what I was reading at the current time. But I think maybe what we need is resources, but that's not immediate enough for Marvel.
Yeah, and I think because it wouldn't necessarily be a moneymaker, that's probably where the issue lies. But yeah, I can see, especially with stuff like the Ultimates, because you could read like Ultimate Spider-Man and be pretty much well versed on everything that happens in his entire little spider life. But people don't, it's not as though you're like, oh, I want to read Spider-Man, and your brain's just immediately like, find Ultimate Spider-Man. And if there's nowhere to tell you, how are you supposed to be like?
I think it's one of those things where I enjoy when I get like Twitter questions or whatever. People are like, oh, I really like Spider-Man, but I don't know where to start. And I always end up going, I feel as though sometimes I have a different answer for every person who asks me the same question, because there are so many different variables to take into account. It's like, well, do you prefer modern art styles? Do you prefer older art styles? How far are you willing to delve back? What kind of Spider-Man stories do you enjoy?
Are you willing to see him be an actual spider?
Yeah, there are also all those questions that are all worth asking. And if the main question is, I'm into the MCU stylings of Spider-Man, you probably say, well, maybe Ultimate Spider-Man is your first port of call in that sense. But it's difficult, because I think if Marvel were to introduce an MCU universe, I'm not necessarily sure who that would be for, in a way. I think if the issue would be, you're looking at, because they do occasional MCU tie-in comics to like there was a prelude to Infinity War, and there was one for Endgame as well, and one for Far From Home. I think the issue is that, well, if the hardcore Marvel fans aren't reading that, because they've already got the amazing, you know, mainstream Marvel universe to actually go to. How do you get people who like the MCU to come into that? And I think that's the big quandary that Feige has. And do you hand out free comics in the cinema? Do you do whatever? It's interesting, and I guess maybe that's why I'm even more concerned, because I think if they did an MCU comics universe, I could just be like, okay, we'll put that in the corner. I don't have to worry about it. That's fine. That's where it is. You can have your toys. I don't mind. But maybe Feige's looking at this and going, well, as a contingency, let's just reboot all of Marvel, and then we can have our through lines to the MCU there, tonally, whatever, and then we'll go from there, which would, you know, force all of Marvel to comply with that one similar thing. But I think the issues stem beyond that, and I'm not sure if Marvel are aware of what that is. I think it's a mix of nostalgia and different things going on, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think you've hit right on the nostalgia thing, because I do think there's a type of comic fan where whatever you do and whatever you change, it's not going to feel the same as the old comics did for whatever reason, for a million different reasons based on whoever you are. And I think the real struggle for like everyone in the creative department is got to be balancing how to get in these new fans, because I mean the MCU has, if anything else, created a ridiculous amount of potential comic fans, and then balance that with us big old nerds who are like, I don't know if you remember Batman 74, because they're two very different audiences. Yeah,
and I guess that's the interesting thing as well, because so many people who read comics, I know a lot of them have contempt for the MCU, but I'm certainly one of those people who I really enjoy. I enjoy picking up on things that I know from the comics, because the MCU is so great at, you know, distilling decades worth of history and putting it into a certain thing. I think it's frustrating, because you look at the Marvel comics and you think of all these creators who put all in this work to inspire the films. Like you said earlier on, you know, how do you promote that when you have those storylines that eventually go on to
be the films.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cyclical.
It's frustrating as well because I'm looking at all of what Marvel are doing right now, and I'm like, well, I think Marvel have had one of their better years. I think if you look, especially what's going on with the X-Men, you look at Immortal Hulk, you look at Captain America, you look at all sorts of Daredevil as well. I think Marvel is still there, but I think maybe the retcons and the relaunches are what put people off. I always come back to Daredevil. I always talk about how when Mark Waid and Sam Neill were doing their excellent Daredevil run, Marvel went through about 2 different reboots and relaunches. So if you want to read that, you have like
The process,
3 volume ones to go to, and that's the frustrating thing. I think again, maybe the issue is looking at resources and the way we compile comics together and how we access them, because more people read trades than they do the individual issues. And I'm not sure. It's weird because I think if you have people who want to go seek it out, they will seek it out.
But sometimes seeking it out is, as I believe I did, being like, I'm just going to read every Batman comic.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea where it starts, no idea where it ends. So if I just read everything, I can never be wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think Feige's... If you're Kevin Feige and you're coming into Marvel right now, what do you think the most immediate concern is, and how would you change that?
I would say the most immediate concern, and it does hit on what you were just talking about, is the sheer amount of different, names and brands that we have. Because, I mean, the problem, I'm sure it's been hit on in other things, is that Marvel focuses quite hard on bringing out new #1 issues instead of continuing their successful series, which I can understand completely, because if a run goes on for long enough, people start to lose interest in it. But at the same time, you can't just keep being like, and here's the first issue, because people aren't going to be willing to get into new things all the time. We don't like change, us dorks. We simply don't like it. So I think it would be trying to find a way to hit on the thing that I think Powers of X and House of 10...
If you got it the wrong way.
Wrong right way.
Yeah.
What they did, which is like having it very much so you could come into it as a completely seasoned comic reader and be like, wow, look at all these references. But you could go into it not even knowing who Wolverine is and be like, this was pretty cool. I saw a robot explode.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it's, obviously that's not replicable across everything. So I guess it's, my focus would genuinely be trying to figure out a way for people who like comics but don't know about comics to get into comics.
I think, that's perfect, because that's the thing that I hope he comes in with. I hope he looks at that. I hope he looks at that and understands the nuances and the differences between the two mediums. Obviously,
well, I mean, given that he's been working on Marvel films since 2000, I think, with X-Men, and he clearly is, as I said, he knows his stuff. He knows the costumes, he knows the lore. He knew Guardians of the Galaxy. And I mean, I don't know if I knew Guardians of the Galaxy.
I did not know Guardians of the Galaxy, to be fair.
So, I don't think the issue will be that he doesn't have that sort of deep knowledge of it. I think the issue will be he's very, 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 very knowledjable. So how do you get
apply
to people
that knowledge,
without dumbing it down? Because I think people don't like when you read these film adaptations and it's I'm being spoken to like I'm a fool because I don't know who Batman is.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I look at it's interesting that way to me, because I think Feige, that's what I really hope he comes to. I hope he looks at the delineation between Marvel Comics and Marvel, the MCU, and sees, well, these are different things. Maybe we can take stuff here and apply different bits and bobs there. I just hope it doesn't become one uniform thing. And I'm interested in that way, because I look at what Marvel are doing and I'm like, I think there are definitely positives and negatives. I think the main issue is getting comics in front of people and convincing them this is worth their time. And some
if there's one thing that the MCU's done, it's that it's found a way to bring out the most obscure people in the world. If you told me 10 years ago that WandaVision was going to come out, I'd be like, 3 people are going to love that. Whereas now it's a legitimate show that who knows how many people are going to watch.
You know what? I think what I kind of want from this, actually, is maybe not an MCU comics kind of division, because I think that makes perfect business sense for Marvel. I don't know whether it would work in practice. I think on paper it's a no-brainer, but I'm not necessarily sure if you're obviously...
It translates.
Yeah, if you're struggling to get people to go read the actual hardcore Marvel comics, how do you then convince them to go read whatever? I think maybe not an Ultimate Universe reboot, but definitely another universe where you look at it and you see this and it has the same tenets of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Maybe that's how you do it. Maybe you have a type of Marvel reality where things do start and do end. I think maybe that's what we're lacking from the mainstream. I think it's too late for the main Marvel comics to actually do anything like that. In fact, Marvel are doubling down on it now with the whole history of the Marvel Universe bollocks.
Yeah.
So in that sense, maybe you look at it and go, well, the main thing that people want right now is structure, and they want
something streamlined.
Yeah, so maybe that's how you do it. Maybe you introduce a new universe specifically dedicated to, if this is what you liked about the MCU, we'll have it, but we'll have it. It won't patronize you. We won't talk down to you. This isn't just going to be an MCU, reference-a-thon where we have our own story group that has different things.
Remember Civil War?
Yeah, exactly. I think if you do that, that would be a great way of doing it. Not just that you can't have like MCU comics. Maybe there's scope to do an Ant-Man and the Wasp Cold War story somewhere down the line, or anything along that line. But I think I should boot the microphone with my giant schnoz. But yeah, anything along those lines where you look at how the MCU has like gotten so successful over the past decade. And obviously it's because they have a lot of money and the films are actually pretty good, and they take the best bits and bobs about the comics.
Some things, yeah.
But maybe the way you do that would be to try something new and tell new stories in a new continuity. And I think the other thing that I really, really want from Feige in this new Chief Creative Officer role is that I really want the creators who are inspiring the MCU to get their due, because we can talk about how they get like the special thanks and the credits and stuff, but like it's only Captain Marvel that had Kelly Sue DeConnick as like a creative lead.
Well,
in the
one
film.
thing I thought was really interesting is I was shamelessly looking at his Reddit AMA this morning because, stalk while you can. And someone had specifically asked, like, oh, is there anyone that you would like to thank that you didn't get a chance to do? And there's just a list of names. He was just like, bam, bam, bam. Here's everyone I wish I could have thanked, but didn't really get proper thanks. They're amazing. And I was like, this is a man who respects the people he works with. I think if anything else, I think that respect will translate really well to creative freedom, but not too much creative freedom. Then that might just be another one of my hopes.
Because actually, we talk about reverence to the source material, even though I'm very much the case where I hope he doesn't, stick his fingers into any pies and, messes around with stuff and ends up causing a mini fire hazard in the process. I do think there are certain aspects that Marvel, that need to kick up the backside. There are definitely aspects where you look at it and you think, well, Marvel Comics 1000, Marvel Comics 1001, are we really going to be, falling on these gimmicks? Like the whole idea of we're going to sell X amount of comics in a year, that feels it feels counterproductive to me, because you're looking at just, we're going to sell this amount when really you should be focusing on telling stories and making sure that you have, because the thing that makes perfect business sense for Marvel here, and it's something that DC have to concern themselves with as well, because you think about how Time Warner are kind of looking at, ever since it was AT&T bought Time Warner, they've been looking at DC and saying, well, we make X amount of money from here, what's DC Comics contributing? I think with Marvel, they're probably safe, because you look at what the films are doing and how they keep on just lifting content from, what is effectively like it's a very cost effective, you want to be very cynical about it, very cost effective just production line of just ideas for films that will go on to make twice as well, 3 times as much money as any comic would. So I think they're safe in that sense. It's just whether or not we'll actually get the change we want to. He could literally just come in and do nothing. He could just put up his feet and these are the films. Hey Dan, you just deal with the
have
the
a good time, docs.
But I really, really hope that we actually see some changes, and that Marvel will start making a concerted effort to stop repeating the same mistakes, like stop doing the whole tie-in event things. Let's actually go and try something new. Let's try and go out to audiences and say, what do you like about the MCU? How can we get you to enjoy these comics? And I genuinely think it is something to do with the lack of a definitive beginning, middle, and end. I don't know what you think.
I think I would have to agree, but at the same time, I think if anyone is going to have a sort of self-awareness of how to structure these things, it's going to be the man who looked at Infinity War and Endgame's timelines and was like, yeah, I'll sign off on this.
Yes.
This isn't crazy.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, I wish them all the success they want, because, Marvel needs it. And I talk about Marvel having a very, very good year. Would you say the Marvel Universe still has a quantifiable identity at this moment in time? Because I read quite a lot of Marvel now, and it's funny because I rant about them the most, but I feel as though out of them in DC, they still have for the past 2 years, they've had the stronger years.
They've had the stronger years, but I think also they've had the stronger years from what would be quite a diverse portfolio, whereas at least with DC, there's a sense of togetherness. Where you're like, they all exist in the same universe.
That's the thing. It's like I read dead. And I'm not looking for stuff to intersect all the time because I hate when events do that. But I do look at the Marvel universe. I'm trying to picture the dots and see where everything falls in together. And some stories I read and I realize from past retcons, it's like, oh, this already happened 5 years ago. What's going on right now? And that is a slight bummer. So I think, not just the whole definitive nature of the MCU needs to be taken account. Maybe the tonal consistency.
Yeah.
Maybe not even the tonal consistency. Maybe just the consistency in general.
I'd like a timeline that doesn't make me feel like a conspiracy theorist for trying to work it out.
Yes, absolutely. But maybe you are a conspiracy theorist.
I may also be.
Maybe that was our confession. But yeah, let us know what you think of Kevin Feige taking over the role of Chief Creative Officer of Marvel Entertainment down in the comments below. Are you excited about his appointment, or does it fill you with nerves like another Marvel gimmick, cover, or event? Oh dear God. Anyway, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and head back on over to whatculture.com/comics. You can follow me on Twitter at EwanRunesThings, and you can follow Zoe on Twitter at
Zemmaskel.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.